Já, velkomin á þennan Azure User Group fund þar sem við erum með Magnus og Mathias frá Solidify. Þeir eru báðir Microsoft MVPs og hafa unnið með þróun á Microsoft-lausnum í mörg ár. En undanfarin ár hafa líka verið að vinna meira og meira með GitHub. So, guys, I'll hand it off to you now.
Great, thank you. I'll just share my screen and we can get started. And one moment. So, can you see my screen all right?
Yeah, looks good.
Great. So the topic for today is CodeSpaces as we use it, and CodeSpaces was actually released at GitHub Universe the day before yesterday. So maybe you wonder how we can have ever used it, but we have been in the beta program, of course. And today we're going to tell you guys about the experience, how we use it at Solidify. But first, a brief introduction. Matthias, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. Nice to be here. So I'm Mathias, working from Gothenburg on the Swedish West Coast. And I'm together with Magnus and another Magnus. We started this company called Solidify, I don't know how many years ago, 5-7 years ago,
yep.
As a company, consultancy company working on the Microsoft technologies. And I have a long background as a developer, mostly working as a cloud architect and a DevOps architect today, both on Azure DevOps and GitHub.
Me, Magnus Timner, I'm a principal DevOps consultant at Solidify, and as Matthias, Microsoft MVP. I've only been it for half a year, so I'm happy and proud of it. I have a background as a developer, as Matthias, of course, but now I usually help our customers with utilizing the DevOps tools in an efficient way. And Azure DevOps is one of those, and GitHub is the other one that we focus mainly on. And Solidify as a company, I mean, we are based in Sweden, but we have offices a little bit around Scandinavia. We also have 2 Icelandic employees as well. Matthias, would you like to start about today's challenges?
Okay, so yeah, then I'm just going to get to the right place, so sorry about that. Yeah, so what we wanted to share is how we at Solidify have started to use this this concept of CodeSpaces. But as a little bit of a background, we're a consultancy company building products. So we do both deliveries with customers and we do our own deliveries. But we're a fairly small company, so we want to make it easy for everyone to help out whenever there's a need. So traditionally we had a process similar to what we have on the screen, or we still do, but we wanted to look at how we can improve the flow, because today the time to first commit, or the process leading up to me actually being able to contribute in a repository, there's a lot of things to go through. Like first we have all the device specific stuff, like if I don't have a PC or a Mac, I need to order a device, I have to wait for it to be delivered, then I need to set up the device, and first after that I can start doing the interesting things, like installing tools, cloning the repo, then I need to get all the build tools right, then I need to get the configuration right, and then I can actually start contributing. So CodeSpaces, as we'll see, was an interesting concept for us to start looking into how we can streamline our internal development processes and also make it easier to jump back and forth between different repos that we're contributing in. And then we also had some non-functional concerns that we wanted to bring in, like security, to make sure that our dev environments are secure. Nowadays, with all the tampering on the supply chain, it's really interesting to have a good sense of security on the development environment, not just the production environments. Also now in these days where we've been working a lot from home, we're not always 100% confident that every home network might be as secure as our company network. So maybe if there's a way to better handle security in the environment. Performance, of course, important to make sure that it doesn't slow us down. We need a solution that works well. Another important thing is the thing around consistency. So when working in a bigger team and jumping back and forth between different products, it's easy to get out of sync. So if we want to work together, we need to follow the same rules. Yeah, it can be everything from tabs versus spaces to which extensions am I using for certain things in the development environment. How do I lint my code and make sure that it looks right? And try to get as much of these functional and non-functional requirements baked into the dev environment. That was kind of our goals, to make it more streamlined, improve time to first commit. So how can we solve that, Magnus? Do we have a solution for this?
We might have. So let's go to the next slide. We have CodeSpaces. So to help out with the long time to first commit, we have a couple of different options without having the code on our PC. One is we can just go into GitHub and edit it on github.com. Yeah, but that's not good. You can you mostly only do text files there. Another option is to use Dot. Maybe some of you have used it or not. It's a simple way to edit stuff in GitHub. So I just press Dot here, and it actually opens a lightweight editor. That's quite cool. I didn't know it until a couple of weeks ago, so that's news to me. And this is not CodeSpaces, but it's an easy way to do stuff, edit files, and you can use extensions and other kind of stuff as well.
You don't have to commit one file at a time. So I think that's one of the cooler things, that you work with a change and not just modifying one file at a time like you would use in the regular editor.
And actually, there are more stuff than this. I mean, I read a blog on Microsoft the other day, and they have something similar as well, vscode.dev. And here you also open a Visual Studio Code editor inside a browser. And I mean, when you edit stuff with Dot, you can only do GitHub, but with Visual Studio.dev, you can do both Visual Studio, Azure DevOps Git and GitHub Git. I really don't know why both these exist, but they probably have something common in the end, in the bottom. But if we want to get a full development environment running, then we have CodeSpaces. And CodeSpaces, it's a cloud-based development environment. You can use it either for permanent development or just small tasks like reviewing a pull request or fixing a bug or something. And you can use these environments both in Visual Studio Code or in a browser-based editor, but the code is, everything you do is stored in the cloud. And this way you can get the development environment up and running in seconds. Those of you who saw the keynote to GitHub Universe 2 days ago, they had a download of the entire github.com, the code behind it. And a guy who did it in his own PC, it took 45 minutes. And when they did it in the demo with lots of CPUs using Visual Studio CodeSpaces or GitHub CodeSpaces, it took only 15 seconds. So you can get a development environment running really, really quick. And you can select what kind of CPUs and memory you want to use when you spin it up. And everything is stored in Azure. And you can even use your own base image if you want to. So I'll just give you a brief preview how it looks. So if I click code here, I have a couple of alternatives here. I have local as usual, and I have CodeSpaces. And this is available at the moment for teams and enterprises in GitHub. So I'll just do a new CodeSpace here, and I can select what kind of machine I want to use. I'm going to come back to the costs a little bit later. So of course there are costs. So I just create a CodeSpace here. And it does, it connects, spins up a machine. And I can also open it directly in Visual Studio Code if I want to. The same thing.
Slightly faster than ordering a machine from your local IT shop. Yeah.
Yeah. So it looks pretty similar to two other stuff, but there's a lot of difference in it that we're going to go into deeper. So we will show you a little bit more soon about what to configure and how you do it. But okay, first you need to enable this. So how do you do that? You go into your GitHub CodeSpace settings in your organization. So we have GitHub Enterprise, and as I said, it works for teams as well. So if I want to enable this for my organization, I just go in and allow it for everyone or just selected users. I can also select which repositories I want to add it to if I want to, or just have it for everyone. That's the first step, enabling it. Next thing, of course, this costs. So we set up billing. So if I go into the billing in my organization, I can see how much we use the different parts of GitHub and how many minutes we have used and how much storage we use and so on. And I can go into the billing settings and set up a limit for how much we want to use. And in this case, we have a spending limit of $50, I think we set up.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I don't know why I got back to the other setting. Never mind, you go into billing settings and set it up there.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
it's
spending limit, there we have it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are a user, yeah, here. And if you are a Microsoft Enterprise Agreement user, then you can connect the billing directly to your enterprise subscription as if you want to. Otherwise, it's just your ordinary GitHub billing. So that's actually all you have to do to set it up. We have one more thing that has to do with setting it up. I mean, you know that there are secrets in GitHub. And you can have secrets on organizational level, you can have it on repository level, on environment level, and so on. But there's also the possibility to set up secrets for code spaces. So you can share secrets to various code spaces. That could be maybe of interest if you have an application with application secrets or something. I don't know, but it's possible to do that anyway. Next thing, if we want to see what it costs. So you pay for what you get, what you use. So you only pay for when the code space is up and running. And if you just leave it, it spins down after 30 minutes automatically. So you don't need to get a big bill if it's on for month and month and month. And so you can see a 4-core for 1 hour costs 36 cents. And also if you just turn it off and have stuff stored in the storage, it costs 7 cents or 0.7 cents per month. And that is when stuff is spinned down. And there's also a nice calculator here as well, a pricing calculator. So if I want to see what it costs for me, I have GitHub CodeSpaces. I want a 4-core 8 gigabytes machine. I just want it for myself. I develop 20 hours a week. I want to have maybe 3 code spaces and average size 10 gigabytes. That would cost me $2 per month. That seems a little cheap. Did I miss something? The hours maybe? Yeah, $33. So, I mean, it's cheaper, of course, than buying a new machine. But you have to, you have to think about what you need it for. So, yeah. Next part is how code spaces work. And so what happens when you start a code space? So first we spin up a Linux machine in the background, and storage is assigned to our code space. Then a container is created because everything is run in a container. With, your source code is going to end up there, and everything that is installed in your code space is there as well. And basically, depending on how you work with it, if you work with a browser, changes in your code space are reflected back in your editor. And if you work with Visual Studio Code on your desktop, it's the same thing. Your editor shows what happens in your code space. So you can actually, you can work exactly how you want with this. And are there any limits with code spaces? When you're an organization, you can work with it how much you want, but there's a couple of limits, or good or bad. Each code space you create is available only for you. That's of course good. CodeSpaces are associated with a specific branch of a repository, and that repository cannot be empty. So you have to have something in it from the beginning. And you can create more than one CodeSpace per repository or even per branch. But a user has a limit of 10 CodeSpaces as it looks now. So Mathias, you want to tell us about to set up CodeSpaces?
Yeah, of course. We want to try it out. So yeah, we will see more in detail how you configure things. So like Magnus talked about, this is a virtual machine running a Docker container. So that's kind of what we have to configure. But what we can do is we can tweak the way the virtual machine runs. That's essentially, we can ask it for different configurations, how much memory and CPU I would like. But then the big thing we can do is essentially customizing what we have inside the virtual machine, which is this Docker container. So as you can imagine, if it's being a Docker container running on Linux, we can make sure it comes installed with the tools that we need, and then the extensions that the dev environment, which is VS Code, can take advantage of. So there's some things that we can do, or quite a lot of what we can do in that environment. We can also customize the CodeSpace environment, just like we can do in our local environment when it comes to Visual Studio settings, and some other things, like Magnus will talk about dot files in a bit. So we can really tweak the look and feel of the environment, so it really tailors our needs. So we started to adopt this, and we have products or deliverables ranging from .NET framework to mostly C# .NET framework. We have some Node applications. We have different front-end applications. So for our first pilot, we said, okay, where do we have a lot of work, and where do we switch between different repos a lot? And it turns out that we do quite a lot of Azure DevOps extension work. We probably work with, I don't know, dozens or 20 or so extensions on a monthly basis. And all of these, they have a similarity that they are built in JavaScript. We use React and TypeScript for that, and they use Azure DevOps as the backend. So we thought, okay, here we have enough similarity that we could start to try this out. So the way we approached it was that let's see what we get working out of the box, and then we start add to it. Because what happens if you start extending the environment, and we'll talk more about it in a second, is that it will somehow affect the load time of the code space. So if we have a default code space and we don't make any startup changes to it, it will load, like we saw with Magnus examples, in a few seconds. So Magnus, do you still have your browser open with a scale repo or
Yes.
the code space?
Yeah, I think I have.
If you go to the code space and we look in the terminal,
Here,
did that
yep.
shut down? Yeah. So if you open up, well, that's yeah, it is the code space.
Yeah.
So yeah, what happens if you go to the menu, or maybe I can start one on my own.
Yeah, I think you should take over.
I'll share my screen.
Show for your machine.
It's so fast to create a new one, so let's do that.
Yeah. Maybe you can do something more than just 4 CPUs.
I don't know. Let's see. So I'll create a new code space. I'll take the expensive one, and then we can see. So we started. You see my screen now, right?
Yep.
Yep. So we started out with the default image, and this is what happened now. It loads or it spins up a virtual machine or picks one from a preloaded setup, and then we got into the code space, and behind the scenes it's doing things. But what we can see here in the terminal, if we pay some attention to it, it says, welcome to CodeSpaces. Thank you very much. You're in our default image. It includes runtimes for yada yada. And we can also click on this link here, I think, and then we can see what's actually been installed. and there's a lot of stuff in it. But yeah, if we go into one of the specific builds, we can see that similarly to build machines in GitHub or Azure DevOps, it comes with a preset defined set of tools. So we have Node, Python, we have the .NET framework, and whatnot. So in our case, we're building a node on the node 14 that works for us. So we can actually use this one out of the box. We have PowerShell. And what we actually did was that we have the source code here, and it's a fairly large application stuff in it. So essentially, we just did an npm install and an npm run dev, for instance. And then we saw what happened. And the great thing was that it just worked. So for this type of applications, we didn't have to make any specific changes. But we'll come back to what you can do. So I'll switch over to, maybe I'll switch back to you, Magnus.
Yeah.
So we can look at what else you can do. And then we'll come back to a bit more what we can customize within the code space.
Yep, I'll share my screen again.
Great.
So we're going to talk about dot files. Dot files are files and folders starting with the dots. And they control the configuration of application and shells on your system. So they have been there for years and years. But now you can actually store and manage your dot files in a repository in GitHub, and you can reuse it when you set up a new code space. That's kind of cool. I'm going to show you that. So I'm a little bit new in dot files, so I have a real simple. This is my Magnus Tim, my GitHub handle, and my dot files. And what I did for this demo, I modified git config. I just added some aliases to do a little quicker stuff. And then I went into my personal GitHub CodeSpace settings, my personal account, and then it recognized that I have a GitHub repository called dot files and connected it. So it's really simple. And when I created my code space here, it used my settings here for my .git configure, and if I write like git as one of my aliases, it works. And this is just a simple demo. I've working with people who have their dot files repositories for years and do lots of complicated stuff with set up terminals and Vim editors in different ways. And you can use all of that here to just get your own customized environment. I think that is really great. So that was that about dot files. Dev containers .json, Mathias.
Yeah. So what I was talking about when I showed the code space that I just created was that we can customize the internals or the inner workings of the container that's been created for us. So by default, it creates this default container, and it's referenced and used internally. So actually, I'll share my screen again. I think that's probably easiest, and now we can explore this a little bit more. Yeah, so here we see the thing actually built. So does things. We come back to that in a bit. So where did I put PowerPoint? Yeah, so we have a configuration file called dev container, which is actually a shared piece of infrastructure in VS Code. So it's been around for a while. Allows you to configure your environment. And it contains.
Sorry about it, but your screen is missing.
Oh, I can see it.
Oh.
I'll do it again.
Yep.
Yeah, I can see it also.
Okay, good.
Okay. Yeah.
There we go.
There we go. Let's fingers crossed it works now. Okay. Yeah. So this configuration JSON is essentially a pair of two files. One is the manifest that describes what's going to be installed, and some of it is configuration driven, and the environment understands it, like elements called extensions, forwarded ports, and features. And that's something the runtime or VS Code will pick up and do for us. But then pre that, we can also provide a Docker file that will be used to configure the Docker image. Again, like I said, changing these settings will slow down the load time. So we have to pay attention to that. If we think it starts to be a pain, then maybe we can trim what's in there. And there is also coming support for us to pre-build our own CodeSpace base images. So we can just reference our set of tools with whatever dependencies so we might need. So it's pre-installed, and then again load times will increase dramatically. And I think GitHub mentioned when they started to adopt CodeSpaces for building GitHub, they had like a build process that took about 45 minutes on a local machine, and they did a couple of iterations with CodeSpaces, and now they're down to, what was it, Magnus? 10 seconds?
Yeah, 10 or 15 seconds.
Yeah, to load a new machine. So that's really cool. Okay, so going back to this thing over here, in a default repository, we just browse to a GitHub repo with nothing in it. Then we don't get any dev container files. But if I click on CodeSpaces, we can add dev container configuration files, and it will parse my project and it will figure out what's probably most suitable for me. But there's a list of other configurations as well. But let's say we're doing Node and TypeScript. We're on the 14 version of Node, and maybe I also want some tools here like PowerShell or the Azure CLI, GitHub CLI. And then, latest is good. Now it generates two files for me, the dev container file and a Docker file. And in this file over here, we get like a reasonable set of extensions from this profile. Like maybe we want this linter. If we don't, then we just remove it. We have the features that we talked about. And then it also adds a Docker file. So in this Docker file, we can add more commands to customize the Docker file. And we can also point it to different root containers for the code space. But as of now, unless you're in the private preview for pre-building code spaces, then you will be able to select one of the root images that GitHub provides. Yeah, so that's essentially it. We for this project or for our pilot, we ended up not using CodeSpace dev containers. We just used the default, and that worked well enough for us. So what we wanted to do in the last bit of the session today is to look at what it looks like to work with CodeSpaces. And we've already seen how we create a code space, but what's the life cycle when we develop in it? And Magnus shared a little bit that there's two sides of it. We have the front end now in the browser. We have a back end which runs the code editor server and does all the back end stuff for us. So I'm not really that much interested in the back end things as long as it works for me. So for me, if the code space experience is like a local development experience where I can develop, debug, collaborate, do my Git stuff, then I'm pretty happy in the type of application that we are in. And in our case, we're doing this. This is one of the extensions that we build, an Azure DevOps extension for managing projects according to the SAFe framework. So it's like a program board and some planning tools in it, whatnot. One of the caveats when building this type of extension is that it's not a pretty picture. Let's see if I can go back to here. So some of you are familiar, I'm sure, building Azure DevOps extensions. But the way that our system works is that it is a web application that runs in the browser. It runs in the context of Azure DevOps, so it's sandboxed in an iframe. and then is allowed to do certain things. So it will call out to the REST services in Azure DevOps. That's where we have the majority of our backend code. And then we have some license services and telemetry going on. When we develop this locally, the way you bootstrap the backend is that we upload an extension to Azure DevOps that redirects in the iframe back to localhost. And then we will host our application in here. We get the calls into our local environments. So when I started this, it loaded the extension on localhost 1991. It turns out that if I do this, I can do that again, takes a few seconds, then it will create a runtime for me. So the editor just works. So it's a VS Code. We developed that already, so didn't change anything. The way we build the system works like this. But as we will see, the change that we need to accommodate to is that when this guy is loading, it will run Azure DevOps expect it to run on the local host. CodeSpace, as we saw in the picture, runs also on the server. So it's running in the cloud the way that it's deployed right now. And GitHub, they done some work to help us cope with this. So in the virtual machine that they're running, the Docker container, they give us the option to expose our services to the outside. So now it's still building, but it's already seen that it will forward my port 1991 to the internet if I choose to. I don't have to, then I can just not forward any ports. If I click on the open link here, then we will see that it redirects to some weird address that gets exposed. And this is the URL to the extension. The problem in Azure DevOps is that we bootstrapped this to be hosted using a developer certificate, and the Azure DevOps extension expects it to come back on port on localhost port 1991, and this surely isn't localhost 1991, so it's not going to load. So if I go to, let's go to our dev environment and just load an instance of I'll take the first project here. We load at scale. We will probably see in the logs that it will not load because it's trying to load the extension from localhost. And as we see here, it's not getting anything there because I haven't loaded anything on localhost on my machine. So this is something we spent a little bit of time figuring out. How do we solve this? And you can probably solve it differently, but the way that just worked for us was to go to CodeSpaces and say, I want to open it in a local VS Code instance instead. So now if I open up the CodeSpace like this, now I run the local client of VS Code. So as we can see here, it's opening the remote. It'll take me a few seconds to get started. And then, yeah, once I get the terminal back, I will start the project again. But what happens when I run it like this, it actually loads the code space that's running in a data center somewhere in my local editor. So localhost will now work. So this is a great, I think, scenario if I want to develop on the edge where I have network things I want to access on my local network. Then I will use the local VS Code project to do so. So let's see why I don't get any terminal here. So we'll see when it takes a couple of seconds to load, but yeah, this is what happens. So while we wait for that, we see that, okay, we get changes. That's all like we're used to. We can create branches. So I'll create a branch here, branch that I call, I don't know, temp CodeSpace demo. We can go and delete that later. So I'll branch it, and then I'll it for commit here, just to show that I can. So I commit this, and then I push the changes. And now if I go back to the repo, we should be able to see that we do indeed have some code pushed to the repo through the code space that I'm running locally. And it's pretty cool. So I'll come back to a little bit about lifecycle management in a bit, but now we can see that everything got started. It's up and running. The ports are now different. So now it's loading on localhost, and I need to, I don't know why my machine isn't. I'm a developer, not the network guy, so I have to type localhost for it to work. But if I do, then again, it's serving HTTPS over a dev certificate, so I just need to trust this thing. But here we can see that it's actually being started to serve content. And if I go back to the dev environment now, yeah, we'll see that it actually loads the extension from my code space. So yeah, probably a lot of data in this project, so it takes a few seconds to load. But like we see, there's starting to happen things right now. So that was kind of it. And the development, editing, debugging experience is pretty much the same. Again, being in VS Code. So if I set this up to debug in the VS Code environment, it will. That would work the same way as we do or used to in VS Code. If I install extensions like the GitHub PR extension, I don't have to leave my development environment. Again, nothing specific to CodeSpaces, but I have access to the same extensions I'm used to use. So if I want to do my pull requests from within VS Code, I can do that. And I can, again, just regular VS Code extension features. I can check out this PR, develop that in the code space, because it's again integrated with my repository. I'm on a branch like Magnus talked about. So if I go back to my CodeSpaces in GitHub, actually go over here, and that was a CodeSpace. So I'll go over here. If I go to my CodeSpaces in the menu, then I can see the set of CodeSpaces that I have right now. So I see this one is active, and then I did something earlier. It's up to date, and this is the cool thing, that it knows about the state in the environment. So if I go and let's make another change here, I don't know, let's do something really clever like this, then quite immediately it will show that this environment is dirty. So now we have a star next to it, and we can see that, okay, there's probably something that would be of value in this code space. And I think this one had it also. Yeah. So if I go and delete it, then I get a discrete notification that yeah, maybe you want to push the changes before you do this. So that gives us that indicator. And the same, obviously, as you could expect, if I don't know, commit this thing, then if I refresh here, it should show me that my local Git repo is one commit ahead, like this one does. But yeah, might expect it to be a second or so delayed, but I think that's still pretty quick compared to what we're used to. So that's the dev cycle. That once you figure out how to set up a code space that fits your product, then the develop, debug, collaborate. I didn't mention that, but in VS Code, there's this live sharing where you can set up a collaboration session with another developer. And through that, you can collaborate in the same code space. Otherwise, the code space would be private to me, so no one else can get into my code space. And you know, I share this funny looking URL, or I open that up in the browser. That one is of no value to anyone else unless I give them access to it. So it's always private, but I can share links to others if I actively do so, but no one can browse into my environment. But I can share the links and then they get access to it, or we can do a live sharing session. So actually, if I still had that one and we have a couple of seconds, I'll actually open up this one as well while we talk, and I'll close the local instance here. Yeah, so there's a little bit of inception going on here, that we're doing things in layers. So now I'm just closing the local development to show that we can share the links to the environment if we want to. So if someone has a local thing going on and I would like, let's say I want Magnus to try it out, then I can change the scope here to make it public or private to the organization, for instance. And then I can, it's a little bit hard to guess this URL anyway, but then I can copy the address and give that to Magnus. But if someone tries to use it, I don't know if I can try this. You should get a 4.0. Yeah, we've got to sign in this case. So you're not going to be able to access the machine unless the owner of the code space wants to. Yeah, and then I showed you how to delete it. If we don't delete the code space, it will hibernate after 30 minutes. So at least it will save all the expensive costs of being active. But of course, you have a small fee for the virtual machine, and right now there's a limit of 10 code spaces. So you will want to delete and clean up once in a while. Again, you get notified if you have pending changes that you don't want to lose. So wrapping up, the lessons learned from us so far is that this works really well for the type of repos that we selected initially. So really fit for purpose for React front-end development, the way we have set it up. Really nice for this inner source culture where everyone can collaborate, and there's not a hassle if a colleague wants to jump in to help out, or if I need to ask someone to help out, they can just, in quotes, create the code space in the repo and pull down the pull request or contribute to the code. So really nice for the inner source, that it's super easy to get into the code. And then also this consistency was really nice, that we could continue to argue about tabs versus spaces, but we can also add a default that just aligns to whatever the team agrees. And performance-wise, was also pretty happy experience. So we typically develop on a Lenovo X1 i7 16 gig machine, and the 4 core code spaces is more or less equivalent to VS Code running on that device. But the good thing with CodeSpaces is that it's consistent. So if I'm running, I don't know, PowerPoint or Outlook or Skype or whatnot, or Slack, I mean, it takes a lot of resources on my local machine. So the performance might go up and down when I'm developing. With CodeSpaces, it's isolated, so I can do whatever I want on my local machine. And next for us, we're going to explore the configuration a bit further. So either if we get into the private preview or that one becomes public. It would be interested to create more streamlined images. But again, it loads fast for what we need, and it has the right set of tools as it is. But we want to expand to more scenarios. So the next round of repos that we want to look into would be .NET Core or .NET 5 or 6 environments. And it should work out of the box by looking at the set of tools installed in the image. But yeah, we'll have to see. And then we have .NET Framework, which again, being run on a Linux environment here, is not going to work for us. So that's a natural way to get the kick in the behind to start modernizing some of our older code bases as well. But we'll continue to evaluate this time to first commit, the flow, how the developers think about this and tune. And we don't want to throw away our Macs or PCs immediately, but it's a good complement for scenarios where we jump back and forth between different repos. So we have a few more minutes, so we have time to chat and explore a little bit, but really encourage everyone to try it out, and just reach out to us if you get stuck or want help or think about how to deploy this in your environment. I think that's, yeah, Q&A, showing whatever we missed to show.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for the presentation. So, so what's the best way to get in touch with you guys? Just via email, or do you have Twitter? Or?
Yeah, email and Twitter. Maybe you can show the first slide, Mathias.
Yeah, we can share the deck, I guess. Oh, yeah, I have the recording, but
yeah,
usually LinkedIn or email gets us attention first. I follow Twitter, but I'm not so active, so I would see it there.
Same with me.
Okay.
Yeah. But we'll share the deck with you guys afterwards, and you have everything you need there.
Great, thank you.
I have one question.
Of course.
Related to the VM itself. Do you know if they're going to provide ARM CPU VMs? I know that ARM is creating server CPUs. I was hoping at some point that they would provide some kind of ARM VMs. Is that something that you know of that's going to happen?
No, I don't. Do you know, Magnus?
I haven't heard anything about it.
Okay.
Happy to look into it, and we can share a link to see if I have it here to an active forum with GitHub, so you could just post a question there, and they're usually fast at responding.
Great.
So has anyone in the call today tried it out already? Trying it out, or is this going to be?
This is new to me. I'm looking forward to testing it. So I guess I'll have to set up an organization for myself and try it.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that's something new for me too. I'm very excited for this. This porting is something that's
I think
it's really cool stuff. Really nice technology that behind there.
Yeah, I mean, we see for us, I mean, VS Code is a pretty good general purpose development environment. So a lot of folks are using that already, and then getting the runtime behind it hassle-free, not for free, but at least with less hassle, I think is it's really interesting.
Yeah, and freeing up your machine to do other stuff like browsers and as you said, Slack and things like that are becoming resource hogs. So
yeah,
having a dedicated machine just for building your code and doing stuff, that's amazing.
And then if you have a temporary resource in your project, you might not want to get a machine for that person. You maybe just bring your own device and spin up the code space.
Yeah.
Be good as well.
Yeah.
I'm also excited. So I think trying it out, personally and in small scale for some repos, and you get some mileage and experience, and you can take it from there.
Yeah. Okay.
Great.
So yeah, it's past the hour, so I don't see any more questions in the chat, but I'd like to thank you guys for coming and showing us this exciting technology.
Thanks. It was nice to be here.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Cool.
Okay.
Have a great weekend.
Yep, same. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.